It's the energy policy debate that has lumbered on for months without resolution. With a make-or-break meeting on the Turnbull government's National Energy Guarantee, it's time to ask, what is this policy and is it worth the pain? The National Energy Guarantee imposes two obligations on energy retailers: an obligation to supply sufficient quantities of reliable power to the market and an obligation to reduce emissions over the decade between 2020 and 2030.
Today, Australia has a price on carbon as
Australia had a carbon price. Tony Abbott called it a carbon tax.
A useless, destructive tax.
And he won an election on a promise of repealing it. That history means the coalition can't drive transformation in the energy market by legislating a carbon price. The Turnbull government needed an alternative.
The critical moment for Australia.
It considered implementing a new clean energy target, then it dumped that idea. The aim of the NEG is simple in political terms: craft a policy mechanism that a coalition government can support that also has some prospect of winning bipartisan agreement from the ALP. In terms of the outcome in the real world, the NEG gives the energy market certainty. The policy, as currently drafted, isn't good for emissions reduction. In a worst-case scenario, the NEG could stall a transformation that is already being driven by the market. The NEG is supported by most business groups, the major energy retailers, the National Farmers Federation, and big corporates like BHP. And it's also supported with qualifications by the Clean Energy Council. The NEG is opposed by environment groups and by some elements of Australia's renewables sector. It's a bit too soon to say. Any state or territory can torpedo it. If the states ultimately agree, the Energy Minister Josh Frydenberg will have to secure agreement from the Coalition Party room to bring forward legislation to implement the emissions reduction target in the scheme. Some government opponents have already threatened to cross the floor. The government will then need to secure Labor's agreement to pass the necessary legislation, because key crossbenchers in the Senate are unlikely to support this policy. Energy ministers from across the country will decide the NEG's fate at a crucial meeting on the 10th of August. This gathering could end more than a decade of bickering over energy and climate change policy. If it all fails, well, we are back to square one, a situation Australian voters are, sadly, all too familiar with.
Climate change is not just an environmental challenge. Climate change is an economic challenge, a social